The 9-second challenge. The dojo was immersed in concentrated silence, interrupted only by the rhythmic sound of bare feet sliding across the mat. Bruce Lee, with his impeccable posture and penetrating gaze, demonstrated a sequence of fluid movements for his students. Each gesture was precise, each breath calculated, a dance between strength and lightness. His disciples watched, fascinated, as he explained the principles of Jeet Kune Do, simplicity, efficiency, the art of intercepting before the opponent even thinks about attacking. It was then that the creaking wooden door opened with a bang. A tall man, with broad shoulders and an impeccably white kimono, entered the room with arrogant steps. His eyes, narrow and challenging, scanned the room before settling on Bruce. It was Sensei Takeda, a traditional karate master known for his rigidity and, above all, his inflated ego. Rumor had it that he had never been defeated in combat, and his reputation preceded him like a shadow. "Lee-sen," said Takeda, his voice full of disdain. "I've heard a lot about your formless art. They say you teach that classical techniques are obsolete." He crossed his arms, the muscles in his forearms bulging under the skin. "But I see nothing more than a man playing with ideas. True power comes from discipline, repetition, pure strength." Bruce didn't move. He just tilted his head slightly, as if assessing a curious student. "And you came here to prove it?" he asked, his voice calm, almost serene. Takeda smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I came to show you, and all these students, what happens when a true master faces a charlatan." A murmur ran through the dojo. Bruce's students exchanged nervous glances, but he remained still, like a rock in the storm. "Very well," Bruce said finally. "Let's see what you have to offer." Takeda wasted no time. With a guttural scream, he launched himself forward, his right fist raised in a powerful blow, straight to Bruce's face. It was a classic attack, loaded with brute force, exactly what he expected. But Bruce was no longer there. The instant Takeda began the movement, Bruce moved to the side with a speed that seemed to defy physics. His body turned slightly, like a leaf in the wind, and his left hand intercepted his opponent's arm in the air. In one continuous movement, Bruce grabbed Takeda's wrist, twisted it with surgical precision and, using the sensei's own momentum, threw him forward. Takeda had no time to react. His body flew through the air and landed with a thud on the mat, his lungs emptied by the impact. Before he could recover, Bruce was on top of him, one knee pressing into his chest, the other hand holding his arm in a perfect restraint. 9 seconds, said Bruce, his voice still calm, as if he were commenting on the weather. "That's how long it took for you to understand that strength without adaptation is just a waste of energy." Takeda tried to struggle, but each movement only increased the pain in his arm. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now shone with a mixture of anger and disbelief. That's impossible," he growled. Bruce let go of him and stood up, extending his hand to help him up. Takeda hesitated, but ended up accepting the gesture, still stunned. "It's not impossible," said Bruce, as Takeda composed himself, shaking the dust off his kimono. "It's just different. You trained your whole life to be strong, but you forgot to train to be flexible. The water does not resist the blow, it absorbs it and redirects it. That's how you win." Takeda lowered his head, his breathing still uneven. For a moment, it looked like he was going to say something, but he just nodded, in an almost imperceptible gesture. Maybe I have a lot to learn," he murmured. Bruce smiled, a genuine smile, without a trace of triumph. "We all do." And so, without another word, he returned to teaching. The dojo, previously tense, resumed its rhythm. But something had changed. Not just in Takeda, who watched Bruce's movements with newfound respect, but in everyone present. Because, that day, they hadn't just seen a victory. They had witnessed the essence of Jeet Kune Do, the art of being like water. The weight of flexibility. The following days at the dojo were marked by a different silence. Not the silence of tension, but of renewed attention. Takeda, once a specter of rigidity, now moved with an almost reverent caution, as if each step might reveal something new. Bruce, for his part, did not mention the confrontation again. He taught as always, with precision, without arrogance, but with a patience that didn't seem necessary before. It was on a humid afternoon, when sunlight streamed through the windows at oblique angles, that the real test came. A man entered the dojo without warning. He was neither a student nor an ordinary visitor. He was wearing a worn but clean kimono, and his eyes carried the same intensity that Takeda once had, only multiplied tenfold. Behind him, two other men, equally serious, stood by the door, as if waiting for a signal. "Bruce Lee," said the man, his voice deep, without greetings. "I heard that something besides techniques is taught here." Bruce didn't move. He just tilted his head, as if assessing not the newcomer but the air around him. "Depends on what you're looking for." The man smiled, but there was no humor on his lips. "I'm looking for someone who can show me why Jeet Kune Do is more than a style." "I hear you're the man for this." Takeda felt his body stiffen. He recognized that tone, it was the same one he'd used weeks ago when he'd challenged Bruce. But there was something more there. A veiled threat, as if the man was not just there to learn, but to prove something. Bruce, however, didn't seem surprised. "What if I say I'm not?" The man laughed, a short, dry sound. "Then I will have my answer." The dojo seemed to hold its breath. The younger students exchanged nervous glances. Takeda, however, did not take his eyes off the intruder. There was something familiar in the man's posture, something that reminded him of himself before he understood what Bruce was trying to teach him. Bruce sighed, as if the situation was boring. "All good. But not here. Outside." The three men followed Bruce to the back patio, where the tall grass swayed in the wind. Takeda followed, uninvited, but also unhindered. "I felt like I needed to see that." The man didn't wait. As soon as they reached open space, it attacked. A direct, fast punch, full of force. Bruce dodged it with minimal movement, as if the blow didn't even deserve a full response. The man insisted, alternating kicks and punches, each one more violent than the last. Bruce, however, seemed to dance between them, absorbing the energy and returning it in precise but never excessive counterattacks. Takeda watched, fascinated. It wasn't a fight. It was a demonstration. Bruce wasn't trying to win, he was showing something. The man, frustrated, tried a low blow, a spinning kick that could have broken a rib if it hit. Bruce blocked with his forearm and, in one fluid movement, turned his opponent's body, using his own strength against him. The man fell backwards, but got up in a second, his eyes burning. "Is that all?" he growled. Bruce didn't respond. Just waited. The man attacked again, this time with blind fury. Bruce dodged, counterattacked, dodged again. There was no anger in his movements, just a ruthless efficiency. And then, in an instant, everything changed. The man, exhausted, let his guard down for a split second. Bruce didn't take advantage. Instead, he stopped, hands at his sides, as if the fight was already over. "Enough," he said simply. The man was panting, sweat running down his face. He looked at Bruce with a mixture of hatred and confusion. "Why didn't you finish?" Bruce shrugged. "Because it wasn't necessary." The man hesitated. Then something in his expression broke. It wasn't defeat, it was understanding. He lowered his head, taking a deep breath. "You could have destroyed me." "Yes," Bruce agreed. "But that's not what we teach here." The man said nothing more. He just nodded, as Takeda had done days before, and turned to leave. His companions followed him, in silence. Takeda stood still, watching them leave. When he turned to Bruce, he found him looking at him. "You understood?" asked Bruce. Takeda did not respond immediately. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "Not yet. But I think I'm starting." Bruce smiled. That's a start. The last teaching. The following months were of transformation. Takeda, once a reluctant student, became one of the most dedicated. Not because he mastered all the techniques, far from it, but because he finally understood what Bruce was trying to show him, that true strength was not in resisting, but in flowing. And then, one cold morning, Bruce didn't show up at the dojo. Takeda waited, as always. But the minutes dragged on, and Bruce didn't come. One of the older students entered, his face serious. He won't come today. Why? Asked Takeda, although he already knew the answer. The student hesitated. He's sick. Very sick. Takeda felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't surprising, Bruce had always been intense, as if he knew time was short. But hearing it out loud made it all real. Can I see him? The student nodded. Bruce was lying in a small room at the back of the dojo, his thin body covered by a blanket. His eyes, once so alive, now seemed tired, but they still shone with the same intensity. Takeda, he murmured, when he saw him enter. Did you come to teach me a lesson? Takeda laughed, but it was a broken sound. I don't think I have anything else to teach you. Bruce coughed, a weak sound. You are wrong. We all have something to learn. Until the end. Takeda sat next to the bed, not knowing what to say. Bruce reached out his hand, as if he wanted to touch his shoulder, but the movement was halted by weakness. Remember, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Water doesn't fight against stone. It surrounds her, wears her down, transforms her. Not with force, but with persistence. Takeda nodded, eyes burning. I will remember. Bruce smiled, a weak but genuine smile. Good. And then, as if he had said everything he needed to, he closed his eyes. Takeda stood there, holding his hand, until Bruce's breathing became a thin thread and finally stopped. The heritage of water. Years later, Takeda was faced with a new group of students. The dojo had changed, now it was bigger, better known. But the spirit was the same. A young man, impatient like Takeda one day out, challenged him after a class. Teacher, I heard that Jeet Kune Do is weak. That has no strength. Takeda looked at him, remembering Bruce. Then he smiled. Come, he said, pointing to the center of the mat. The young man attacked, confident. Takeda deflected, absorbed, redirected. Not with anger, not with brute force, but with the same fluidity that Bruce had taught him. When the young man fell, panting, Takeda reached out his hand to help him up. Strength is not in breaking, he said. It's about not being broken. The young man looked at him, confused. Like water? Takeda nodded. Exactly like water. And so, without another word, he returned to teaching. The weight of legend. The years passed, and Takeda's dojo grew not only in size, but in reputation. Students of different styles arrived, some to learn, others to test. The young man who had fallen to the mat that day, named Ren, became one of the most dedicated disciples. But Bruce Lee's shadow never stopped looming over Takeda, nor his students. One day, a Muay Thai master named Kiet arrived at the dojo. He didn't come as a student, but as a challenger. His school, the Iron Blade, was known for breaking weak styles in competitions. Kiet was tall, muscular, with scars on his arms that told stories of brutal fights. He didn't smile when he entered. I heard that they teach Jeet Kune Do here, he said, crossing his arms. I heard it's just dancing. Takeda was sitting in Seiza, watching the students train. He got up slowly. Dance is movement. And movement is life. Kiet laughed, a dry sound. Life is pain. And I'm going to show you. The news spread quickly. On the appointed day, the dojo was packed. Students, curious people, even some teachers from other schools came to watch. Ron, now more experienced, felt the weight of the moment. He knew that Takeda was not fighting for pride, but for something greater. Kiet got on the mat first, flexing his muscles. Takeda came up later, calm, as if he was about to meditate. The Muay Thai master attacked without warning, a quick, low kick followed by an elbow. Takeda dodged the first blow, absorbed the impact of the second with a turn of his body, and counterattacked with a precise punch to Kiet's solar plexus. The man staggered, but did not fall. "Is that all?" he growled. Takeda did not respond. He knew that Kiet was used to dominating through force, winning through fear. Then he did something unexpected, he backed away. Kiet walked forward, confident. Heavy blows, spinning kicks, knees. Takeda dodged, redirected, used his opponent's own momentum against him. With each blow Kiet landed, Takeda seemed lighter, more fluid. Until, in a moment of imbalance, Takeda grabbed his opponent's arm and threw it onto the ground with a smooth movement, as if he were guiding a river out of its course. Kiet stood up, furious, his face red. "You don't fight. Just run away." Takeda took a deep breath. "I don't run away. I hope." And then, Kiet made the mistake of underestimating him. He attacked with everything, a spinning punch that, if it hit, would break bones. Takeda dodged at the last moment and, with an almost imperceptible movement, delivered a blow to Kiet's neck, not to knock him out, but to stop the blood flow for a second. The man collapsed, dazed but conscious. Silence took over the dojo. Kiet looked at Takeda, no longer with anger, but with something close to respect. "What was that?" "A reminder," said Takeda. "Strength is not in destroying. It's about knowing when to stop." Kiet stood up, shook his head, and bowed. "I didn't say anything else." He left the dojo, and never came back to challenge. The legacy. Years later, Ren took over the dojo. Takeda, now with gray hair, watched from the sidelines as his student taught a new generation. Jeet Kune Do was no longer seen as a weak style. He was respected, not for his rigidity, but for his adaptability. On a quiet afternoon, Takeda sat under the same tree where Bruce had once told him that water has no shape. He closed his eyes and smiled. "You were right," he murmured. And just like water, the dojo continued to flow. The last student. The years passed like leaves blown by the wind. Run, now with the first strands of silver on his temples, maintained the dojo with the same discipline as Takeda, but with a gentleness that only time teaches. Students arrived and left, some seeking strength, others philosophy, few understanding that both were the same thing. Among them, there was a girl named May. Small, with lively eyes and quick hands, she didn't have the patience for traditional forms. Whenever Rin taught a sequence, she deviated, improvised, as if her body already knew what her mind didn't yet understand. Rin watched her with a mix of curiosity and concern. "You don't follow the techniques," he said one afternoon, after she had knocked a student twice her size off balance with a move that wasn't on the curriculum. "They don't follow me," May replied, shrugging her shoulders. "Why fight like others, if I can fight like me?" Ren recognized the words. They were the same ones that Takeda had used decades before, when he himself questioned the rules. But something bothered him. May wasn't just adaptable, she was unstable. Like water without a vessel, it flowed, but it also overflowed. "Jeet Kune Do is not about breaking rules," said Ren. "It's about understanding why they exist." May smiled but didn't respond. That night, she disappeared. Takeda, now a slow-stepping old man, still visited the dojo occasionally. When Rin told him about May, he just nodded, as if he already knew. "She's just like you were," he said. "But you were afraid of making mistakes. She is not afraid of anything. And that is dangerous. Or necessary." Days later, a rumor reached the dojo. May had been seen in a clandestine ring, facing fighters with brutal styles, without protection, without rules. Ren went there, expecting to find her injured. Instead, he saw her defeat a man twice her weight using only a spin and a kick that belonged to no known style. When she saw him, she was not ashamed. He just wiped the blood from his lip and said, "Don't you understand? I'm not breaking Jeet Kune Do. I'm taking it further." "Further to where?" Ron asked, his voice tense. "Where he always should have gone." The conflict came months later. A Muay Thai master, embarrassed by being defeated by a girl in a dirty ring, publicly challenged Run. It wasn't just a fight, it was a statement. Jeet Kune Do, he said, was weak, a style of philosophers, not warriors. Takeda's dojo would be closed, and his legacy erased. Ren accepted. On the day of the fight, the dojo courtyard was packed. Takeda, leaning on his cane, watched in silence. Mei was there too, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on her opponent. The fighter was huge, with scars on his arms and a cruel smile. The fight began. Ren moved like water, dodging, counterattacking, but the fighter was relentless. Every blow he landed caused the ground to shake. Mei clenched her fists as a kick connected with Ren's ribs, sending him reeling. He got up, but it was clear he wouldn't win like that. Then something changed. Ren stopped fighting like Run. He stopped thinking about techniques, about forms, about everything Takeda had taught him. It flowed, like Mei did, like Bruce had once said water should flow. There was no style anymore, just movement, pure and instinctive. The fighter, confused, hesitated. And at that moment, Ren knocked him down. The silence that followed was heavier than any blow. Afterwards, Takeda approached Mei. "You taught him," she said, surprised. "No," replied the old man. "He always knew. He just needed to remember." Mei looked at Ren, who was breathing hard but smiling. "And now?" she asked. "Now," said Takeda, "the dojo continues. And you too." Years later, Mei opened her own school. It was not a traditional dojo, but a space where techniques mixed, where students learned to fight not only with their bodies, but with what they already carried inside them. Run, now with white hair, visited her sometimes. They didn't talk much. They just trained, side by side, like two currents of the same river. And Takeda, in his last days, sat once more under the tree. He closed his eyes and listened to the sound of footsteps on the mat, the laughter of the students, the wind in the leaves. "Water has no form," he murmured. "But she always finds the sea." And then, like water, he was gone.